Plastic crack is a thing.
I totally am in on the plastic crack.
I think plastic crack is a perfect description, because once you get addicted, you gotta have your next fix. Where's the next big thing?
I mean, I guess I kind of resonate with the plastic crack analogy. Yeah, for sure.
I'm just a user. I'm a heavy user, I guess.
I agree. I mean, it is plastic crack. Once you get that one piece, you're hooked.
You know what? There is no misdiagnosing plastic crack.
Welcome to Plastic Chats, the special interviews of the Plastic Crack documentary series. Today's topic is
the Collectable Spectacle series.
So, let's start the show!
Hi everyone, my name is Guillermo Olivo and welcome to Plastic Chats. Plastic Chats is additional content from the Plastic Crack documentary series. For those of you in the future, these episodes were recorded during the 2020 pandemic while some of us were still quarantined. Today, I have a very, very special guest, someone that we've been talking here and there for probably a year or so. But it's someone that means a lot, not just to me, not just to the production, not just the production company, I may add, and not just to my crew, but also to the collecting community. And I know this is like the first time that he decided to do what I'm actually being forced to do, which is to be in front of camera, because we both belongs to the behind the camera type of things. And so it's pretty much we're in the same boat. We're not supposed to be in front of the camera yet. We're taking that step, and I know that he's doing it for the community. So I would like to welcome our guest today.
Let's meet our guest!
Chad Hucal. How are you, Chad?
I'm good, Guillermo. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, no problem.
You're all the way from Vancouver, right?
Yeah, west coast of Canada, and we are polar opposites in North America right now.
Literally, because I'm recording this from Florida. Well, like I said, this is a very special episode. But some of you, my audience won't know until I say it. But before I get there, you are a big G.I. Joe collector, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't think I'm way up there in terms of people's collections. I have a pretty full vintage collection, which I would say is 82 to 94. It was the technical run of the toy line, but I collected up into the early 2000s and even later, but then I just shrunk my collection back down to vintage only, essentially. But there's definitely way bigger collectors out there than me. Right,
but I didn't mean big G.I. Joe collection in regards of amounts of units, but it's curated. I know it's a very neat collection. I know you dwell heavily into a foreign world, and you have a very specific focus. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I luckily have stayed away from foreign figures. Like, there's the guys who chase all the South American and fun school figures, and I don't envy those guys at all because it's a rabbit hole and it's expensive. Mm-hmm. I ended up somehow just focusing on the Vamp. So, the original 82 green Vamp, that mold kind of got shuffled around all over the world, ended up in India, the UK, South America. Obviously there was multiple molds, and there's different molds, I should say, but I just kind of got hooked on that variation of that mold.
There's a famous, actually, I haven't been able to get my hands on that one. There's a famous Canadian variant, right?
Yeah, in 83, Sears put out a Cobra version. It was all black and included the MMS, little 3-missile trailer launcher. And it was called the MSV. It's become super rare. It was dirt cheap back in the day. I think it was $14.99. But now they don't go below $1,000 in almost any condition. So. Oh yeah, and they're super hard to find. So, but some people believe that it was a very short run, right? Yeah, I think they're only rares for that reason. They were only released 1 year, probably Christmas or winter of 83. They may have had leftover stock into 84, but you're talking sold in Canada only, so that's a way smaller market than the US. It was a 1 year production run. They probably only did actually one run of the toy, boxed them all up, mailed or shipped them out or mailed them out, however they were delivered to people, and that was it. So it's not like it was a toy mass produced in the US for 3 or 4 years, like some of the early G.I. Joe stuff. This was a one and done, and there wasn't really a collector mentality back then. So kids ripped the boxes open, assembled the toys. Maybe some kids weren't as excited by them because they were all like pure black. It wasn't really, a bright toy.
But it looks cool though.
Yeah, it looks cool.
But pure black gives it another level of.
I think adult collectors think it looks cool because it's all black, but as a kid, it may have been kind of boring. So.
Oh, interesting point.
Yeah.
I don't want to assume, but do you have the Canadian variant?
It'd be hard to be a band collector and not have it. I actually have 2 of them, and I feel bad saying that because I know there's some collectors out there who would like to get their hands on one.
Oh, yeah.
But I do have 2 that are mint incomplete with all the original parts. I know one of the big problems with the MSB is people will often have incomplete ones, so they'll steal parts off the 1989 Tiger Sting, which also had black gas cans and a black steering wheel, but it's a different plastic and it's got different part numbers on it. So it's easy to tell if you know what you're looking for. But,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Fun Skull variants, like the racing Jeep, the red racing Jeep, and I think it was a blue police car? There's someone there.
Police Jeep, yeah. So there's the MRF racing team or racing Jeep, whatever. Uh-huh. Those came out or started to come out probably in the mid early 2000s or something. Because when I filmed Air's Collectible Spectacle series, we were already talking about them then, and that was 10 years ago. And in the police Jeep, there's actually 2 variations. There's a dark blue and then a light blue, which came in a 4-vehicle box set.
That's the perfect cue to the remaining of your introduction. Chad happens to be the filmmaker, the brain, and the executioner behind Collectable Spectacle. And for those of you in the Joe community, you probably has come across this wonderful series that has been freely online for everyone to see for 10 years already?
Yeah, I think Mark Palomo's initially went online maybe 2010 or 2009, somewhere in there, and then Air's would have been the year after. So it's been at least a decade, essentially. If you have not seen it,
I strongly, and if you collect Joes or any toys in general, and if you have not seen the series, I strongly suggest for you to go and watch it. So again, this is going to be, this might sound weird, but at the same time, I think it's cool. 2 directors from toy documentaries interacting and talking about their work. However, that's how we met. Through a mutual friend in one of the toy conventions. I think it was the last Joe convention in Chattanooga. Well, we met in that, and someone told me that you were behind that film. We spent 2 hours talking?
Yeah. I was actually surprised when we started talking, and you mentioned, how much it was sort of a template for your Plastic Crack series.
Correct, because on my end, as a collector, I came across that many years ago. I probably seen it I don't know how many times. However, when we entered the whole process of let's develop Plastic Crack, we took the decision down the road. It was supposed to be one film, one lone feature, but down the road we taped in Michigan and everything changed, and we came back with a lot of footage, and the showrunner Francisco Salazar and the main producer Karina Rosendo, she goes and they go and say, man, you should do a series. You have so many footage that it's going to be a waste to throw it down, and we just went into this crazy rabbit hole into turning it into a series. So of course, when we changed the format to a series, I'm probably the only collector in my crew. Frank, who happens to be a showrunner, he's heavily into the geek world, but he doesn't collect. Sean collects Funko Pops and some other stuff. But the crew in general, everyone who did the booking, and I needed for them to know where they were getting themselves into. And the perfect template for them to fit into the format was to lock ourselves up in a conference room for about a week and watch every single one of your episodes. So it was funny when we connected in Chattanooga, and actually we got to talk about this, because I'm feel very gratified to be able to tell you this, because your film was heavily influential in the making of mine. So
Right.
I'm basically paying tribute to that. You did an amazing
I appreciate that. I mean, I really only made it for toy collectors to watch. I mean, I kind of had the same idea. I was probably 10 years too early doing it because, you know, like you've been able to make a series with Amazon with your Plastic Crack. And I did actually pitch it. I pitched the idea at the Banff Film and Television Festival. And I actually signed a deal with a production company, and we pitched it to a few Canadian networks, and it just never ended up getting off the ground, being developed. And I kind of sat on it for a year, and then that production deal basically expired. And I just thought, well, what the hell? I have a camera. I know some collectors. I'll just go do this myself and see what happens. And yeah, I ended up talking to Mark prior to, you know, deciding to do that. And I said, hey, if I came out to New York, would you want to go through your stuff and film it? And he told me that he was actually planning the second edition of his Ultimate Guide to G.I. Joe, and that there was a photographer coming up who was going to redo all the photography because he will say this himself, the vehicle photos in the first edition are pretty bad. He didn't know anything about photography, and he admits it. He was shooting like all, you know, bird's eye view, straight down, a lot of blurry out of focus shots. So they sent up an actual photographer, and I just said, well, why don't I come out and we'll film that whole process of the photographer and you know, redoing everything, and then we'll also go through your storage bins and everything, and that's kind of how that came about.
And maybe without you knowing, you were registering some sort of toy history, because Mark's Bellomo's collecting guides and books are very well cared and very well dear in the hearts of the collecting community.
Oh yeah,
having that behind the scene, I know it wasn't on purpose, but at the same time, how cool that you were there right at the moment that the books were being made.
Yeah, no, it was fun. The photographer's her name was Chris. She worked for Krause, who was his publisher, and the three of us had a great time. It was summer. I was July or August or something like that, but it was definitely summer, and it was smoking hot in New York. So his house had AC, but the AC, as you probably have experienced, it messes up audio recordings if you're filming, right? Okay. So we would have to turn the AC off, and there's the three of us in that small room with the lights and the camera gear, and you know, I'm filming the whole thing while she's taking the photographs, and he's doing all the little adjustments with the figures and vehicles. And then
there was no LED lights back then, so I'm pretty sure there were bulbs, and that generates 5,600 Celsius, and that's not fun.
Yeah. So we would go as long as we could, and then we'd have to kick the AC on and just sort of bring the room back down for 5 minutes. And
well, I went to school into film school in New York, and let me tell you, filming in the house in New York, regardless of where, is always a challenge, regardless of when. Because when you're in the winter, then the furnace, it's even worse than the AC. So New York is always a challenge, but at the same time, it's a lovely place. However, he does live out of the city, like way up north, correct?
Yeah, he's in or he was then New Paltz area, I think. So
right. That's a complete opposite as well to where you're at right now. So how do you get to that jump of, let's go and do a documentary about a toy collector, and let's pack my stuff, let's go to the state, and out of your own pocket, correct?
Yeah, out of my own pocket. But it was kind of I guess 2 birds with 1 stone kind of thing. My girlfriend at the time, who I'm still with 20 years later, she was living here in Vancouver. We met at where I worked, and she ended up going to school at NYU to get her master's degree. And so I was going to visit her in the summer. I was talking to Mark, and I said, well, hey, I'm going to fly to you, Mark, and I'll stay for 4 days, whatever. I'll film with you. And then I just kind of continued on into New York City. So it was kind of, it was still out of pocket, but I managed to get 2 things out of the trip.
Right.
So yeah, I flew there, but then of course I took 1 or 2 trains and a bus, because he's not exactly in a major center. So I eventually got to him, and then he came and picked me up, and we just went from there.
And so it was heavily guerrilla style. Like, you have no lighting guy, no audio guy.
Oh, there was nothing. I
Nice.
I had at the time, this is again 10 years ago, but I was so green with the camera. I'm like, I just left everything on auto. I'm like, I can't figure this stuff on the fly because it's just me. I had no lights. I was only recording audio off the camera. I didn't have Mark properly mic'd up with his own mic or anything. So sometimes, like when he's in the storage lockers, if he goes in too far, the audio kind of drops off. But yeah, it was totally me and my laptop and him, and we just, spent a hot 3 days. Well, hot weather-wise, 3 days in the storage locker and in his house, and yeah.
Well, now that you mentioned the storage unit, I think that's one of the peaks of Mark's arc within your documentary, because you get to enjoy from an audience perspective. You get to enjoy the whole making of the books, and he's very passionate about.
Oh, he's totally passionate.
The toys, and he gets very deep, and he's like a walking Wikipedia of Joe's.
Yeah.
However, the storage unit puts the whole thing in perspective, because then you go and say, "Wow, look at that! This guy has a storage unit." We had a very similar situation with Irvin Santiago. And he was like, let me show you one of my storage units. So I took Sean, I took Arthur, I took part of my crew and actually showed them your film and say, hey, we're going to face some similar, setting here. So this is one I want to grasp. And in the events of if you see a box that is open and there are cool Joes in there, you better give me that shot and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But there is a moment... There's a recurrent situation during Mark's storage part of your film that is highly commented among the toy community, and this Mark throwing stuff around.
We already looked at the Tidarium shuttle.
And eventually you say,
it pains me when you throw those things.
Yeah, I mean, I had never seen a collection that big before, and literally for me, I mean, it's kind of like I'm there standing out in the sun filming into the storage locker while he's opening stuff, and I've never seen anybody with these many toys before. So I'm kind of half trying to film it and make sure stuff's kind of framed, but I'm also just kind of looking at stuff like that is crazy. But yeah, he would but the people that comment about him sort of haphazardly throwing boxes and stuff, it was also just many days into the film shoot. We have been doing this because I was only there for a short amount of time, right? So it's not like we lounged around in the morning and then would film for an hour or two and then take a lunch. We were filming from the time we got up till the sun went down, because we were trying to cram as much stuff in, right? So after a while, he's opened so many boxes, he's seen so many things. I think it was just out of, not frustration, but just like, okay, here's another box. And he's trying to move on to the next thing, but he's not really maybe thinking about that box that he just tosses to the side. And yeah, I think at one point I make a comment like, oh dude, you're killing me or something.
Yeah, you did. But it's ironic because he's an archivist of toys. He's very passionate about toys. He's someone that actually truly enjoys toys. And then you see him, I don't want to turn the episode into that, but I know that there's a common denominator when people talk about the film and they go, well, but that guy throwing his boxes in that storage room is just, I had my heart, it gave me anxiety. Yeah. But that's a great explanation. Is there any behind the scenes or any cool story that you want to share about Mark, or anything that you decided that didn't make the cutting room and didn't make it into the actual film?
Well, just to go back to your point about him being really passionate about and his knowledge of the toys. When you watch the episodes where we're in the storage lockers, specifically, if you look at the sequence where he's talking about the MASH playset, or there was an Indiana Jones Well of Souls playset, he just like totally lights up talking about those specific toys in particular, and like you can tell that he's really, like you said, passionate, and he's a curator of what these things were to kids growing up and now to adult collectors. In terms of behind the scenes stuff, I mean, I think I divided each Collectible Spectacle series into 18 episodes, and I think each one's roughly 15 minutes. Some are shorter, maybe some are a bit longer. It's about 3 hours each, maybe. That's the bulk of the material. There may have been a few things that we left out, but it was either just repetition, or the only thing that I didn't get to show, and I did film, but we didn't use, was because of a sound issue. But we went to this professor's house who was, I guess, his mentor, you could say, and Mark and this gentleman are sitting in a gazebo in an outdoor setting. But again, I didn't have proper mics. I wasn't really set up for this, so their audio kind of disappeared. But there was some really cool non-toy stories told in that session. But again, it wouldn't have been related to toys, but if that would have been something I think some people would have been interested to hear.
What about that, the USS flag in the patio, just waiting for her turn to be on camera?
Yeah, that was, we set that up outside in his driveway in between the stairs going up into the house where we had the photography set up, and his garage, where he basically, actually see that in the video too, he staged his garage for all the G.I. Joe vehicles. So we would grab them, bring them into the house, photograph them, bring them back out. But yeah, we set the flag up right there on the ground. I think he put a white sheet down or something, and it was out in the sun for a couple of hours.
Not to the point to get damaged by the sun.
No.
But it, for those who don't have a flag, like seeing a flag like that, you're going, holy smokes, and there's a flag. But so this is pretty much, I resonate with this question. How, as a G.I. Joe collector, were you able to stay on task to make your film with that amount of toys? Because for me, it was very challenging in the whole plastic pack taping. How do you do it?
I mean, I had a lot of stuff back then, but I've probably picked up more since. But when we were in Mark's garage, like I said, he had everything basically laid out on all the shelves and on the ground. And that was just kind of cool, because there was tons of things I didn't have at that point in time. And that probably started me off on my vamp kind of odyssey. There's one of the episodes of Mark's series he basically has I think the 82 vamp, the 84 vamp, the mail away 84 vamp, which is a different color and has different parts, and a stinger and a tiger sting, and he has them all lined up. And I remember filming that, and I was just kind of fascinated by the fact that it's all the same toy, essentially. It's the same body, the same wheels. It just has a few, part replacements and different colors. And I kind of thought that was kind of interesting. That probably was the kernel that grew into the 12 freaking bins of vamps that I have now.
I actually came back with, I don't know if you're familiar with reactions from Super 7. They're very similar to the vintage Star Wars toys.
Okay.
I came back from Motu Joe, which is a huge Masters of the Universe collector. My collection is 3 3/4. I don't have a different scale. Yeah. And I had Motu as a kid. I still have a few from my childhood, actually. But when I came back from his house and I saw them in my hand, I'm like, I need to have this. I need to have this. And now I'm complete. But so yeah, on my end, it was very challenging to hold the geek, to hold the toy collector, and to actually stay on focus. Thankfully, I'm the only one in my crew that actually is so passionate about this, because they kept me in check at the whole time. But you were by yourself.
Yeah.
How do you manage to put a film without falling into?
Well, part of it was, you were kind of. You had to answer to somebody, right? Yours was an actual production. You had a crew, you probably had a budget, you knew you were going to be, showing this somewhere. I had no idea what I was doing. For me, it was just a glorified home movie. So, but I was, I got a sense of detail. I wanted to make sure I filmed stuff. If he held something up too quickly and put it back down, I'd say, hey, can you just hold it up for an extra second? And I'd zoom in, get a tight shot. But it was super casual. So it was just me and him shooting the shit, talking toys, and I'm just filming it. I was, like I said, I was trying to frame it nice and whatever, but I never had an end goal in mind. So I wasn't like sweating bullets thinking, oh no, I didn't get that shot, or I should redo this. It was just very much on the fly, very much just what happens.
So you enjoy it, and that I believe that translate into the camera. I have that strong belief that once you're very passionate about what you're doing, that usually translate into the final product. And I tell that to my crew all the time. Like you can tell when they're engaged into a project because of the final product speaks by itself.
Yeah,
and
I think
that
I didn't.
Is your case, definitely.
Yeah, I didn't do this with Mark's. There's a little bit. Like I think if I like film, so I kind of have a slight idea of. You got to have a few establishing shots. I think when Mark first goes to the storage locker, I had like a far away shot with him opening the door, and just there's a few little shots in there. But with Air, we went a little bit more aggressive. I don't even remember if this was my idea or her idea, and her son Colin was there at the time. But with her Air's episodes, I think at the beginning of each clip, there's some random toy setup.
The 12-inch on the pool floating.
I had Destro and Baroness lying in lounge chairs. I think there's some rock vipers hanging off some rocks in her backyard.
It's like
we put the killer whale and the shark in their pool, and just did some kind of opening shots and just something to give it flavor.
Yeah, like establishing shot. I really enjoy that. But now that you mention her, so how do you go from New York to Texas? How do you make that jump?
Kind of the same thing. Like I did the thing with Mark, all out of pocket, put it on YouTube. I figured I have nowhere to sell this, so I'm just going to put it on YouTube. And then a year later, I was talking to Air, and I had this nice camera. I had some extra cash at the time just from working. I didn't really have a lot of expenses. So I said, hey, if I come down to Texas, maybe we could do another one of those series. Because she was one of the only, well, not the only collector, but one of the only huge collectors who was relatively open about her collection. She would post pictures, she would share information. She wasn't secretive at all.
Back in the forum days, if I remember correctly. Right.
Yeah. And so I offered to come down, and she offered to pay for part of my flight. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Just, give me room and board for 4 days or whatever while I'm there, and I'll take care of the rest. So I came down there, and her and her son came out to the airport and picked me up, and spent like probably 4 nights, 5 days with her in Texas, just outside of Dallas. And it was weird. I was sleeping, I believe it was Colin's room. He was sleeping in one of the guest rooms, and her house at the time was just wall-to-wall G.I. Joe. It consumed the entire house, and that was part of the reason I think she got burnt out on collecting. Is it was just a tidal wave of G.I. Joe.
Oh, you can tell because every episode gets crazier and crazier.
Yeah.
And I think that's from my humble perspective, I believe that's the success of that part of your films. Because you say, okay, we reached the room where the jewels are, but no, there's another room that actually tops the previous room, and it's just crazy to go from one room to the other.
It was everywhere. The only rooms that didn't have G.I. Joe, and that was by design because she needed that break, was the kitchen, and I'll come back to that in a sec, and her bedroom. So, but the kitchen, if you watch the series, there's toys everywhere. But that's only because we used that as the staging area. So like they were in the living room, they were in every single room upstairs. And she would, the night before, basically just set up the kitchen. So, there was the 12-inch stuff, there was the 3 3/4-inch stuff. So she would have it all set up, and she was probably up to the wee hours of the night. And then I would come up in the morning or come down in the morning, and we would start filming. So in the videos, it looks like it's everywhere, but the kitchen was, a safe zone, I would guess you could say. But
what was your sensation when you walk into the house for the first time?
There's definitely some shock and awe. Because we walked in the side by the back door, so there's a pool, there's a patio, and you come into the kitchen and it's empty, and it seems like a normal house. And then she gave me the grand tour. You walk into the living room where her office was, and that was the room that had like the floor to ceiling boxes of G.I. Joe there was 12 different or whatever Sky Striker variant.
From every country.
Yeah, and then she took me upstairs, and it was on every wall and in every room, and then she had a whole room just of international Joes.
And there's like hidden.
Oh yeah, there's like hidden, like under stairwells, and I'm like, it was like, I don't even know how you describe it. It was very surreal to actually stay there for 4 or 5 days, day and night, and but they were very accommodating. They were super friendly, and it was just a great experience.
How do you guys know each other? Like, how did this happen?
She was fairly big on the Yojo forums back in the day, so I probably exchanged some messages with her then. But I also remember when I did the Mark version of the series the year before. Like I said, I did it out of pocket, so I think it was like $1,000 total, which was airfare, train, bus, whatever.
This is truly guerrilla style.
Oh yeah. So the only cost was basically me getting there. That's all transportation.
You have to be very proud of that, because it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look cheap.
So when that was done and I put it on YouTube, I think I posted in a few places, hey, I made this series. It cost me this. I'm putting it out there for free. If anybody likes it and you want to like throw a gratuity my way, like $2 or whatever, you can just send me $2 to PayPal or something. So she was probably one of the people who sent me a donation or a tip or gratuity or whatever. So that's how and she sent a note, because she was very much like Mark, an archivist or whatever you want to call it. She was documenting the history of these toys. So she thanked me for doing that, and gave me a donation. And in the end, the tips or gratuities or whatever never came close to covering my costs. But I thought, if I could break even, it'd be fine. But it never happened. So anyway, we started talking then, I think, and then further in the Yojo forums. And then that's when I proposed, hey, I'd do it again. I'd come down to Texas, and that's when she offered, to cover some airfare. But I said, don't worry about it. Just, give me a place to sleep and food for 4 days or whatever. And
that's awesome. So, now there's a group of guys doing this tour. She's giving a tour. There's like different parts of there's pieces where she's explaining to you, and you only things like in the kitchen, and when you guys go to the 12-inch, and the comic books in the laundry. It's just mind-blowing. But there's this group of people walking that they're getting an introduction, and maybe it's time to introduce them.
That actually I had nothing to do with. I didn't even know it was going to happen. The plan was for me to come down there and just go with her and film her whole collection. That was something, I don't remember if it was her idea or Drew's idea. Drew Kremer, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He's fairly close to her in Texas, near Dallas there. So one of those two organized it and had, a handful of people, I think it was 4 of them maybe, come over. And because we also thought it'd be a good idea, instead of just being her talking to the camera, because I'm never seen, I'm always behind the camera, to have, it's interesting to have a different audience perspective if she's there talking to some people. So that actually kind of worked out really well. So we walked around the house, and they were asking questions,
and they were saying like, "Whoa!" And you started capturing their reactions. I know.
Yeah. So it was good to have that, because I was probably having the same reactions, but I'm behind the camera, so you weren't going to see it. So it was great to have a live, real, reaction from people who had never seen that.
He gave them balance. But let's talk about that big diorama room, which she had like underneath bases.
Yeah.
And she explains that she made this playset for their kids. The part that impacted me the most in that part wasn't the dioramas, which was super cool, or the amount of vehicles. Yeah. It was the drawers.
Oh yeah.
That's just nuts.
Yeah, you'd open drawers and there would just be like piles of parts or whole figures. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm not an army builder.
We need sailors, and then there's lots of gung-hos and in sailors attire.
Yeah. So I'm not what some people are, which you would call an army builder. They might have 50 of a Viper or whatever. I just have one of each, basically.
Guilty.
There you go. But yeah, she would open these drawers, and I'm like, oh my God, there was like tons of figures. So yeah, her and her sons had built that room, that diorama room, and it was pretty impressive. I think there was another room which I don't think I filmed. This was all on the top floor of the house. So there was the diorama room, which had all the drawers of figures and all the cool displays. There was another side room, but again, it was just boxes of doubles and triples and quadruples of vehicles. So if she ever broke apart, on a vehicle, she could go up there and harvest another part from another toy.
So it's like a spare room.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it wasn't organized though. So you'd look in there and it was just stuff in boxes, and it wasn't as organized as the rest of the house was.
I believe if my memory serves me well, in that room where the diorama room, there's the hidden compartment little thing that one of the guys that was doing the tour actually went in there. And
yeah.
It's just mind blowing.
Well, the other thing too that isn't in the documentary, because we just didn't have time, there was a massive Star Wars collection in that house that we didn't even touch. There was that custom sail barge that they made, and there are some Star Wars figures on there, but there was a huge Star Wars collection that was all stored in these like wall hidden compartments.
So I don't want to delve into her as a person, because it is my understanding that besides the fact that she wanted to share information, she was very open about that. She's also a very private person.
Yes, yeah.
But was everybody okay in that house with that amount of toys?
You mean people who lived there? Yeah, it was. It's becomes a way of life. I mean, every family dynamic is probably different. I'm sure some people have a significant other who can't stand the amount of crap that's in the house, like all the plastic toys. Right. And there are some, partners or whoever that love it and share the joy of it. But yeah, there was I certainly didn't sense anybody who was like, oh, there's just toys everywhere. It wasn't that kind of a vibe at all.
Now, there is a very specific, my favorite part of, and I'm biased on that, it's when you get, I believe it's to a room which she has bins, but like plastic containers, and she finally shows, because I need to elaborate this a little bit more. She was a pioneer in the online buying from abroad. She was hitting Mercado Libre way before some of the American collectors knew about those sites and stuff like that. So she was getting, let's say, for a very low price compared to nowadays, foreign figures from abroad, from everywhere, because the whole goal was to make a complete book of every single piece ever made in the Joe world.
Yeah,
right?
That was her goal.
However, in that room, she showed the Ruby Blast, and she showed the White Mortal from my country, Venezuela, my country of origin, Venezuela.
Yeah.
Were you aware of what you were capturing on camera? Because I don't think that has been seen ever again.
Yeah, I think, like I said, my knowledge of foreign Joes, now by default, I kind of know stuff, but my knowledge of foreign figures wasn't spectacular back then. It was called the Toybrary. That was the room we were in. So it was like every toy line imaginable in all these different bins. And then she had the whole wall of G.I. Joes from every country. I knew that those South American figures were rare. And usually whenever I saw pictures of them, they were all beat to hell and missing thumbs or paint or whatever. But she had all these like beautiful, pristine figures.
Pristine condition.
And I'm like, yeah, I think at the time I had a good idea that what I was looking at was like a lot of money for starters and just like a lot of work. She put so much time and effort, and I know from my own experience of chasing vamps, like I'm on eBay like every day. I've kind of saturated my vamp collection. There isn't a ton of things that I'm still looking for, so I'm just doing it out of habit now. But literally, in order for her to get all that stuff, she was hitting, all those online sites every day, multiple times a day, and you got to be at the right place at the right time quite often. Like I wasn't even aware, just to sidetrack, she she opened some UK stuff, Action Force stuff, and I didn't even know that there was other variations of the SAS Panther, which is the black vamp, essentially from.
With
so
yellow.
there's a yellow roll bar, there's a black roll bar, but then there's painted stencil logos, and then there's sticker logos. I didn't know any of that stuff, and she started showing me all these variants, and I'm like, I had no idea any of this stuff existed.
I like the fact of that's my favorite part, not because of Ruby Plus, but from my perspective, that's where she gets most passionate about what she's saying. Like her eyes change, and the way that she's going through those bins, and then she starts showing unproduced prototypes, and it's just crazy. Every single bin was just crazy.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that?
It's like it's that weird thing. When it's just me filming, I kind of have to. Half the time I'm, looking in the viewfinder or whatever, and half the time I just totally forget that I'm filming, and I'm just looking at what she's opening up. Right. She had a whole big bin of, at the time, modern Joes, so late 2000s prototypes. She had a bunch of unreleased prototypes, and I didn't even know existed. And she's like, "Oh, do you want one?" And I'm like, "Sure." So she just handed me an Arctic Duke, I think, prototype that was never released. And she was very she was a very open, giving collector.
So let's clarify urban legends.
Okay.
The Argent 7, which is a nickname attributed to wave of figures, of 7 figures from the Argentinian Plastirama series. There's a lot of people that claim that she was the one that coined that name, the Argent 7. But you have reasons to believe that is before, right?
I've heard that too. From what I hear, she may have been the first person to coin that phrase. I'm just not 100% sure whether the first time was in Collectible Spectacle. She mentions the Argent 7 in that series that I filmed, but I think that name was used before then. I'm not 100% sure. So maybe that was the first time she said it, or maybe it had been around for years before that. I can't really tell, but I do know that I've heard from several collectors that she's probably the first person to have, given that nickname to them.
Is it true that she opened it the top of, I actually have one that supposedly comes from that house that has the top of the bubble with a little very neat slice, because she took the figures out to take the pictures and then put it back on the
I've heard that story too. We didn't talk, it's certainly not in the series that I filmed, and she didn't talk about it, but I think I've heard that afterwards. But yeah, she would either cut a little hole in the top or slice a side just to get, because she very much wanted to film or photograph figures and vehicles in pristine condition, because like you said, she was working on that book, and the book obviously never saw the light of day.
I was going to ask you, that was going to be my next question. What happened to the book?
So I honestly haven't talked to her for years. I don't know all the ins and outs. There's all sorts of stories floating around the internet, which is what the internet is used for these days, is starting crazy rumors and lies. The initial idea was she was collecting. Then the story got out that she had a hard drive crash and had lost years of photos and text documents. And so that kind of burnt her out, and she wanted to sell her collection. I don't think that's the truth. I think it just became too much for her. It was overwhelming her house, her health, and she just decided to sell it. I've since then heard that her hard drive didn't in fact crash, that all her work may have just gotten misplaced on another hard drive or inside a folder. And so all the work that she did do, I believe, still exists. Okay. I don't think it's ever going to be published because it was never finished. But she did show me, and I don't remember if I showed this, if I filmed this or not, or she just showed me separately, but she did start going through some of the files that she had, like the 1990 General, that big that big rolling base with the
I
helicopter.
remember seeing, I believe it was that one. No, it was the Defiant, that she had like two right next to each other on a set with lights and stuff like that.
Right, but the general, she actually, because what she was doing was she was photographing every single part that went into the toy. So if a toy, you open the box and you had to build it, if it had 50 parts, she was photographing every single one. You could see the part number. She was documenting all that stuff. So it was gonna be a series of books.
But that's a Titanic.
Oh yeah, one person could never have done that. I applaud her for trying, and I think as it went along, and she discovered more and more international variants, she realized it was just a tidal wave that you could never escape, and it kind of probably just. So
this is a good lesson for like I collect international Joes, but I try to keep it contained. But this is a great lesson for people out there. Even if you have unlimited amount of money, that is the real rabbit hole in collecting action figures. Try to stay away. We're gonna have a special episode about that, actually, about foreign Joes. But that is a real crazy rabbit hole.
Yeah. Oh, and fun school's the worst because, and I think other collectors who are into this kind of stuff would agree. It's not necessarily that there's a lot of actual variants. There's just a lot of sloppy production. So you might have one figure that was made with certain paint apps, and they made however many thousand, and then there was a change of shift on the workers or something, and they forgot to paint app something. So then they made a couple thousand of that version. So I think there's just a lot of sloppy production with fun school stuff but now people chase them. So with Beachhead or something, there's a dozen variants or something. I don't know.
So there's also this perspective out there that she probably had the big, and we're not trying to establish who had the biggest one, but apparently she had at a certain point the biggest ever G.I. Joe collection, right?
I mean, that I've ever seen. I mean, I've been told that there's other, men or women, I don't know which, out there who have large collections, but they're just super private about them. And I don't doubt that there are guys out there who have massive collections. I think a few weeks ago I saw some guy on Facebook, I don't remember his name, but he was showing off the basement of his house, and he has this like ridiculously cool Star Wars collection, and it's all beautifully displayed. And that's someone I had never heard of, never seen before. So I'm sure there's lots of guys like that out there.
From my perspective, and I travel the whole country taping collections, and I know collectors from all over the world. The biggest collections are usually not on camera. They rarely allow themselves to be, not everybody likes that, and I respect that too. But I remember seeing pictures of James and Simone collection. Irvin Santiago has a just crazy, something that I saw with my own eyes, crazy amount of G.I. Joe collections. But I believe that the change or the difference between heirs and everyone else is the amount of foreign variants. That sets the difference. And it's just, again, we're not trying to pinpoint who had more, because that has never been the goal of anything that I ever done, but it was more mentioning. What happened into that collection?
Again, I wasn't really, this was years after I filmed with her, so I don't know all the ins and outs. I think it was like 2014 or 15, somewhere in there. It's when she decided to basically pull the plug. And there was a convention in Dallas, which I didn't go to. Like I said, I hadn't been to any of the conventions at that point. I guess this was probably 14 then, because I went to my first one in 15. But I had heard that she had, had a few local friends and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of selling. If there's any guys that you trust who are at the convention, bring them over, and they can kind of have a look at what I have, and if they want to make some offers, I'll start selling." So I think it was affectionately recalled as AirCon. So there was a handful of guys at 4 or something that came over in shifts and started going through her house, and they would, pick up things. That was kind of the start of it. And so it sold, from what I understand, to individual collectors for a little while, and then eventually a few people came along and just took big chunks of it until it was all gone.
Trucks even, right?
Yeah, again, I don't know all the details of it, but I believe a big trailer truck was brought in from the Midwest somewhere and loaded up. And
Yeah, I know people that actually bought during AirCon, and there's the stories that I just don't want to talk about it, but there's the stories of people actually going with trucks and spending.
Yeah, oh, I don't doubt it.
Spending.
And so, yeah, I went to my first convention in 2015, which was in Springfield, and Chris Neal had bought a huge chunk of her collection, and he had one of the biggest, best booths you were ever going to see at a convention. It was like 5 or 6 booths all combined, and it was just like a potpourri of what was left of Air's collection. And I actually managed to pick up a few things for my vamp collection. I think I got an Italian Stinger in an Italian box, and one of her Dreadnought ground assault boxes. And so I got a few things from her collection. But man, I would have loved to have been at her house when she first started selling.
Well, there's many stories that they're not part of the topic of, but there are many stories that it was rough. Apparently, it actually, some friends even told me that she was having a hard time getting rid of all that.
Oh, I don't doubt it at all. You spend years of your life, just the amount of money and time and energy to amass that collection, and then just to make that decision to let it go. And yeah, I don't doubt that she had a tough time going through with that, because you're never going to get it back. Even when I sold off all my modern stuff from 2002 to relative recently, I spent so much time and money amassing that stuff, but then I just hit a wall. I'm like, I don't want this stuff. I don't look at it. And I started selling it on eBay over the last 6 months. And I'm like, there's a part of you when you're shipping off a box with 100 figures in it, you're like, I'm never going to get these back. Do I really want to do this?
You lost your
and then you know what?
Your soul goes in that box.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, also it's and she said the same thing. It's like a weight off your shoulders sometimes. Just letting go of stuff that, you know, you can cling to stuff for too long and it just weighs you down.
You can actually see the walls now.
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys are not in you guys lost contact?
Yeah, I don't think she talks much with other collectors anymore. I know she's still friends with Drew, but that's just because they live, 15 minutes apart or something like that. But she's not active in any forums or any groups or anything. She's not in any of the G.I. Joe groups.
To retire, pretty much.
Yeah, she essentially retired, and I don't blame her. She's enjoying her life with her dogs, and she trains dogs, so.
I think one of the most appealing aspects of her episodes in your series is the passion that just sweats out of her. I have recorded a lot of collectors, a very passionate collectors. That type of passion, it takes her to another level. So I always admire the way that she displays her passion for toys. I'm a toy collector myself, and I'm very passionate about toys, but it's appealing. Yeah. There's also a part when I think some of you ask, give me an advice or give an advice for collectors, and she goes and says, don't let it get to this point.
This is too much. You really do. I mean, seriously, when we had a lot less, we enjoyed it a lot more. We could play so much better. We didn't have to, in order to get something, like me just showing you that rock and roll, I had to move so much stuff to get to it, that it's too much. And I really, really regret that it came to this. I would never have started had I not, I wouldn't have committed to making the book had I known it was going to get so nuts. And I can't wait to get rid of it so that we can enjoy it again. Yeah, don't let it take over your life. It's like, she was very knowledgeable and very passionate, but at the same time, she was also very controlled. Like when she can open a bin and be passionate and knowledgeable about everything in it, but she's also just like, she's not like, rattling off words. She's just very calm and like, this is what this is. And, it was relaxing. I think if she had been really manic and animated about it, it would have been like a lot for me to take in for 5 days. But she was just very, very calm, but also very sure of, her knowledge and her passion.
She wasn't throwing stuff in the storage.
No. She was very delicate with all of her stuff, for sure.
what has been the reaction online? I know that you actually the videos went in the very early ages of online video sharing, became like a viral sensation, but then you taped this whole thing in 720 and now you decided to elevate it to high def, and you pretty much erased the
I did. So I initially, like again, this was 10 years ago, and the camera that I was using had like little SD cards, which at the time were really expensive. So I had to ration how I was filming. So I was filming in 720. The standard kind of now baseline is 1080.
For those of you that might not get this part, basically what you're saying is that you decided to go for that quality because you can get more space in the card,
right?
Correct?
Took up less storage space on the cards. So anyway, I filmed in 720, and then I uploaded it to YouTube. But now 1080p, which is the amount of lines of resolution, is the standard. So I kind of I cheated I removed the old files off YouTube, recorded how many views they had. Some of them were on 50,000 plus or whatever.
Correct.
And then I basically forced those 720p files into new 1080p files. So I cheated the upres and made them a larger window. So if you open them on YouTube, you can play them in a bigger window, and the resolution is relatively the same, but I just wanted to make them a bit more presentable and future-proof them as technology gets better.
Right, to elevate it. But what about views? Like, do you get those views back, or no?
No, because I deleted the old ones and started fresh with the new ones. So you're starting from zero.
Right, but my point is, are they back to that amount of views? These new ones.
I honestly don't.
You don't track that anymore.
I don't really track it. I don't look.
Have you?
I haven't watched those videos in years.
New generations, that's interesting. Have you noticed new generations of collectors in the groups? I know that we belong to the same, we share the same groups and sometimes, but have you noticed new collectors saying, hey, I just found this, check this out? And what's your reaction on that? Like, I want to hear your take on the positive, because I have not seen anything negative on the positive reaction that your film had with the community.
Yeah, there's always new people stumbling onto it. I'll occasionally get emails from YouTube saying there's a new comment, and it's someone saying, oh my God, I can't believe this collection. Or someone in one of the Facebook groups posts a link to the video thinking they're the first person who's ever seen it.
Right.
And everyone else has been watching it for a decade. But whatever, people are always discovering, classic albums that were made 40 years ago. So
right.
There's always going to be a new generation of people finding stuff.
You should be proud of the reaction that you've gotten within the community, because it's 100% positive. There's a lot of us that enjoy your series because it was really well done.
Well, I'm glad I did it, especially with Air. Like, I'm glad I filmed that collection before it kind of got disbanded in the wind, because if anyone else has a collection like that, they're not willing to share it with anybody. Mm-hmm. So there's no way to film it. So at least I was able to document that before it kind of got scattered.
But that comment is a perfect catalyst for the next question. So now you are working on an archiving project that is going to live on the web. It's a website. Tell me a little bit about that. You're taking pictures?
I'm taking pictures. It's really nothing totally special. I unfortunately live in a condo where I don't have the space for a man cave. I don't have a basement. I don't have a garage like some collectors that I'm obviously jealous of, who can have a dedicated room to toys. So all my stuff is, neatly packed and stored away in a back room I have these decorative panels that kind of cover these metal shelves basically, but they're not on display. So I'm just essentially creating a virtual display, which is basically just going to be a website with my collection that I'm going to have all high-res images of, and a huge chunk of that website, which I think will be interesting for some people, is my vamp collection. So I probably have like 60 plus variations of the vamp. So that, North America, international, whether it's a color, a part, a mold change, whatever. I've got about 60 different vamps, and then I have probably 30 something customs that I've made. So it's close to 100. But in addition to that, I'm trying to collect anything vamp related. So I've gotten catalog scans of old Sears wish books, JCPenney catalogs, all those kinds of things, any artwork, collectible paraphernalia, anything that showed a vamp, a stinger, a tiger sting, anything that used that classic vamp design. Blueprints, box variations, it's huge. I still have a ton of photography to do, but already there's thousands of images on there. And if you have any kind of an interest in the vamp, I think you could probably spend a day going through what I've collected on there. I'd like to have it out in 2020 sometime, but it's just a slow crawl, trying to find the time to do it and edit it and all that.
And with that said, why don't you talk about your most recent, we have this segment where we show and tell our most recent find or most recent purchase.
Show me what you got.
So in 1986, Takara, for 1 year and 1 year only, released a line of G.I. Joe products. Basically just probably leftover vehicles and figures from Hasbro's inventory, but they made their own unique boxes and blueprints, all in Japanese, obviously, and the boxes are completely different from the American versions. So I was under the impression that there aren't any variations of the Takara Vamp. But the other day, or last week or so, I was looking at one on eBay and there was an image of the blueprints and I'm like, those blueprints look different than what I have. So I went and looked at the blueprints that I have, compared it against the photo on eBay, and sure enough, there's a pretty distinct difference in the text layout. And I'm like, that looks like an actual variant. Plus the Takara version of the Vamp, for reasons unknown, came with the 1984 clutch, which was the light brown or tan version. He's on the box artwork on the front and on the back.
Correct.
But the version that I saw on eBay had the original green Vamp. He was still in his bubble, and the bubble looks like it's taped into the box. So my initial thought was a collector at some point had just swapped out the brown one for the green one, thinking, oh, it looks better. But now I'm like, the tape that's holding it in place is yellowed and it looks old.
It doesn't look tamper with.
So I don't know, I haven't got it in the mail yet, but when I do, I'll have a better look. But because of the fact that there's a variant of the blueprint, there could have been a small run that had the green Vamp or the green clutch figure, and then they changed the blueprints at some point to be what is the normal version. So when I get it, I'll find out. But I have a suspicion that Hasbro may have sent them, leftover stock. They may have had some of the green Vamps or the green clutches left over. But Takara had gone ahead and made the packaging showing the tan. So there may have been some that came with the green clutch, but the majority obviously would have come with the brown clutch. The toy collecting is an interesting thing. I think there's obviously a stereotype, I think, that exists with toy collectors. Less so now than there probably was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. For me personally, it's not, it's a passion. I wouldn't call it an obsession. I don't live my life chasing toys. It's fun, it's a hobby, it's a nice diversion from, the crap that life can, dish out at you sometimes. So as long as you're having fun and you're not taking money away from the important things in life, I think it's a nice, hobby and something to keep you feeling young, I guess.
And it's definitely healthy as long as you don't go crazy and you don't compromise your finance. And if you keep it on the sane side, it's actually a very healthy addiction, a plastic crack addiction. Because
and if you're
in a bar drinking, you're not going out, it's healthy. I don't see any.
Yeah, if you're spending it on drugs and alcohol, that money's gone. At least with toys, there's a possibility you can get your money back. I think right now we're kind of in the peak of the market. Like if I was to start selling my vintage stuff now, I don't think I'm ever going to get better prices than right now. Because figures, even in the last 6 months, are just spiking. Figures that were normally a $30 figure are now getting 100 plus.
Correct.
But I think obviously, like I'm in my mid 40s, as are most collectors of my generation. And in another 10 years, people are probably going to start dumping this stuff a lot more. Value is going to go down, but as long as you're not holding on to this stuff because you think it's going to be your retirement or something, you know, have at it.
If you bought with the intention of selling, this is the moment to sell. But if you're not like some of us, if you're not doing this for the monetary value, then just enjoy your thing until it fades away.
Yeah,
that's how it goes. Well, thank you, Chad, again so much for stepping in the camera and crossing that barrier that I'm crossing as well, and talking to me on this show about your series. I sincerely hope people, if you haven't come across that, you might want to go and check it out, because it's an amazing experience. And I would like to thank you for what you did to not just the community, for my team, and it has been a very inspiring journey to try to step into, you know.
Well, I'm glad you guys were excited by it. I'm glad it's kind of propelled you along in your career too, with the plastic crack. So
thank you.
Keep making them.
Oh, how about you? What about you? You're done with the camera work?
No, I mean, you know, I always had ambitions about, you know, making films. I've just been kind of slow in doing it. I just do little hobby projects, you know, shoot some music videos for friends and stuff like that. But, you know, I've written scripts and stuff. I've just never heavily pursued making them. But, you know, when the time is right, it'll happen.
Hopefully that will be soon. I'm pretty sure if you keep that essence and that passion that you put in your project, that they will just be immediate success. So once again, thank you so much for being on the show today, and I looking forward to talk to you later.
Okay, I have one little thing to add to you. I just as a little point, when I did the Mark, the first series, and like I said, I put it out there, hey, if you like the series and you want to throw a gratuity my way, you know, send me $2 through PayPal or whatever. There were obviously, you know, the jackasses out there who are like, hey, you put it online for free, why would I give you money? But there was a guy, and most you know, most gratuities I got were, you know, $2, $5, $10 here and there. There was someone in, I don't know if they were in like Denmark, it was definitely Northern Europe. They sent me $100 through PayPal, and they're like, I love toys. I really appreciate you taking the time and the energy to do this. And I'm like, $100 just to send to a stranger for no reason whatsoever. That was an interesting experience.
Nice. I'm pretty sure. I'm so glad that you're taking this opportunity to mention that, and hopefully that person is watching, and you know, we never know. We close the circle. You never know. Thank you so much, Chad, and it was a pleasure.
My pleasure, Guillermo. All right, take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Please remember that all of these episodes were taped during the crazy 2020 pandemic while we were all locked down and going nuts. So bear with us. Also, and I found out not so long ago, so don't feel bad, that if you hit the bell below, like, you know, the little tiny icon that looks like a bell, YouTube automatically will let you know when the next episode is about to come out. So make it easy, just hit the bell. Like, subscribe, do all of that stuff, but hit the bell. Well, I had so much fun taping the next one. We're gonna have Teresa Delgado from the podcast Fangirls Going Rogue, among others. It's like, I don't know, like 5 different podcasts. She's amazing. And she'll tell us all about collecting from a female point of view. You don't want to miss it. This is gonna be really fun. Lego, Star Wars, you name it, everything was there.
Plastic Chats is a series of special interviews that complements the Plastic Crack documentary series. The interviews are made with informational, entertainment, and educational purposes. Neither this short nor Plastic Crack documentary series are sponsored or endorsed by the companies or brands mentioned in this episode. The comments made on this episode do not reflect the point of view of the production company of these series, their employees, and associates. If you haven't seen the Plastic Crack documentary yet, find us on Amazon Video and Vimeo on demand. For updates, behind-the-scene pictures, and a lot of extra content, check us out on Facebook as Plastic Crack Documentary and on Instagram as Plastic Crack Film. Help us get found. Click on those 5 stars and stay tuned for the next episode of Plastic Chats.